So again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I know there are lots of stuff happening today, and I am so honored that many of you decided to spend this next 50, 60 minutes with all of us here. So again, we have an amazing panel here today, very strong and powerful women who have each been doing really some amazing and incredible work for many, many years. And I have been fortunate enough to get to know them, get to collaborate with them. And sorry, that's my dog cheering on the women in the background. Really apologize. So again, thank you so much for being with us. So let's get started. I think just in terms of, I'll introduce everyone. We're going to have the speakers introduce themselves as well. I think in terms of the format, I'm really hoping that this is very much a conversational style panel. We have some questions that we received from the audience, as many of you were registering, that I will be moderating the event and asking our wonderful panelists. And then again, if you have questions that, if you hear something and it comes in your mind and you would like one of our panelists to ask or perhaps answer, or perhaps multiple of our panelists to answer, please put it on the chat window, and I will take a lot of those questions towards the end as well, or maybe in the middle. So again, very conversational. If you're able to come on video, that is awesome. And as you all are joining, if you want to just put on the chat window, introduce yourself, and maybe just kind of share, where are you joining us from today? What do you do? That would be awesome. And we will get started. Well, welcome everyone. So just in terms of just a little bit of housekeeping and a few boring details, so please bear with me. Again, this is a really safe event, safe community, and so feel free to participate how much you want. If you're able to, again, come on video, that just kind of creates like a really intimate setting. So that would be awesome. If you find something useful, take a screenshot. If you find something useful, feel free to share on your socials, participate on the chat, introduce yourself again, as I mentioned, engage, uplift each other. This is kind of a neat little community. Ask your questions, share your ideas as well, because there might be things that perhaps you've done in the past, or perhaps you're thinking of doing, that might help someone else who's here. So with that, I just wanted to take maybe a minute or so to share a very simple agenda. And I also want to introduce the community that I lead. And I'm just going to mute everyone. So just bear with me there. So the agenda is pretty simple. We are going to be spending majority of our time in the panel talk, asking questions and having conversations. I do want to leave some room towards the end for audience questions. But again, if there are questions that come up, please put it on the chat window and I will be moderating. So this is going to be a test of multitasking for me right now on a single laptop and a single screen. So we're going to see how I do. So just a little bit, I think for those of you who are joining us for the first time in any of these PMDojo community events, I just want to take maybe a minute to introduce what this community does. And so again, as I mentioned, I'm Bosky, and I started PMDojo in 2019. And I started this community, this global community, because after almost 2 decades of working in the tech industry, I felt frustrated, like many people. And I kind of felt like a big part of my soul just left me. And that was because of a lot of things that were happening, both on the two sides of the equation, both as candidates, as people who are trying to succeed in the industry and thrive in the industry, but also from the hiring side. So I'll just share a couple of my frustrations and pet peeves that I had developed over the years. One was I was really exhausted and tired with the lack of diverse pipeline conversations that was happening in the industry. We know that there is a diverse pipeline that exists. We don't need to create one. But what is really happening is that there are no clear pathways and equitable opportunities for people who come from all these different walks of life without a pedigree, if I can use that word, right? And so I wanted to kind of do something, even a small thing, to create those equitable pathways for people. and help companies as well as candidates, especially who are trying to make it in the tech industry. And the second one was for all those folks who are trying to make a transition into product management or UX, some of these very, very competitive fields. They end up typically spending tons of money in boot camps and certifications and reading all this theoretical stuff. And they end up back in square one because they're unable to stand out, their confidence is crushed, and they don't have that real world experience. So they can't really compete with people who come with all of these experiences trying for the same roles. And so I wanted to do something to solve both of these biggest frustrations and pain points that I was seeing. And that's why PMDojo was created in 2019. And some of the things that we do in terms of helping our community, of course, is running all of these amazing free events. So feel free to subscribe. And then we also have our PMDojo Product Accelerator program. So it's been amazing to see a lot of the work that has gone on for the last 3 years and to see 95% fellow success rate. People who come from nursing and teaching background, without college degrees, with college degrees, any field use, name it, to actually be able to make successful transitions and get promotions and 2x, 3x their salaries has just been very, very humbling. And so, yeah, if anyone's interested, feel free to reach out. If you know someone who's trying to transition, please share PMDojo. It's a completely grassroots community. And the way it works, very, very briefly again, is that you get to really step into the role of a PM or a designer, just like what happens in the real world in companies. You get to work in cross-functional teams, you get to work with developers, and all the way from ideation, validation, you actually end up launching a live product in 10 weeks with live learning and mentorship and coaching. So it's really, really cool. And yeah, I'm really excited that we have launched equity scholarships as well yesterday. So again, if you know anyone, please feel free to share. But with that, I'm going to stop and I'm going to open the floor here, really welcoming all of our panelists. Landy is going to be joining a few minutes late. If she hasn't joined, I'm just going to do a quick check. She is going to be joining. She's running a little bit late, but let's get the party started. So thank you everyone for listening. Let's do a quick round of introduction. I don't think I'll be able to do justice for any of these wonderful women. So let's kind of get started. Mace, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Mace Chang. I'm based in San Francisco, and I am a product leader and startup advisor. So I actually started my career as a scientist. I did genetics research for a long time, even got my PhD in genetics before I realized what I was most excited about is how do you bring these really exciting discoveries from the lab and get them into the hands of patients and customers. And so for the last several years, I've been working at the intersection of healthcare, tech, and product, and building products really from bench, so for scientists and research all the way to bedside. So my last company, I was in a mental health tech company using voice biomarkers to detect different mental health conditions, and really excited to be here today and happy to share some of my experiences across startups and larger companies. I've worked in companies as small as 8 people, and for a while I was the only woman on my team at that 8-person company, to a large public biotech company, Zymergen, that was about 1,000 people.
Thank you, Mace. That's so wonderful to kind of hear everything. Every time I hear, your background and experience in a lot of the sessions that we do, I'm always amazed. So again, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. I'm going to be passing the microphone over to Rukmini. If you want to introduce yourself, Rukmini.
Hello, everyone. First of all, happy International Women's Day. So glad to be here kicking off Women's Day, talking to this amazing group of women and the awesome panelists. So thanks, Bosky, for the opportunity. I'm Rukmini Gopalan, and I currently work as a technical product manager at Meta. I started off my career more as a software engineer after my computer science degree. At that time, I will admit that I had no idea what product management or PM even did. But as I started my career in software engineering, what I got attracted to was taking a zoomed out look at the problems and being that bridge between customers and technology. And that kind of became my zone. So I spent over 3/4 of my career at Microsoft working on various products and programs. And I also spent about 3.5 years at smaller startups. And now I'm at Meta. And throughout this arc, what I have always been fascinated by, and I've made it kind of my zone, is working on infrastructure and platforms where there is very complex technologies. There are consumers who are building on top of our platforms, who are our stakeholders, and also customers who are actually using those products as business decision makers. So that's kind of me. I'm based in the Seattle area. I'm also a mom of 2 kids. So speaking of equity, I definitely bring the perspective of how life was before I was a mom and after I was a mom. And I really look forward to this panel of discussion.
Thank you so much, Rukmini. Thank you. Victoria, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Bosky. I also want to acknowledge you, Bosky, for pulling this together and just what you're doing with PMDojo. It's absolutely amazing. And it's hard to pull together an event like this and, run it. So just really, hats off to you for all this great work. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Victoria Young. Bosky and I actually work together through my startup Outpace, where we provide one-on-one coaching with expert design content to help people level up in their careers. And Bosky is one of the incredible coaches that we do have as part of Outpace, out there helping product people really get into more senior roles, level up their skills. And we use a combination of short form content and messaging and live meetings to really help people get to where they need to be with someone who's truly a career champion and advocate for them in their corner. Prior to starting Outpace, I worked in consumer tech. I was a product marketer at Facebook, now Meta, worked on Facebook Live and Facebook Watch, helped launch Uber Pool with the go-to-market, and was a product manager at Netflix on the product innovation team, helping with content strategy and how we could improve the personalization of the algorithm. And so all of my past experiences led me to start Outpace because I saw how challenging it was to really rise as a leader, especially as a woman of color, in these environments, right, that are very much male dominated, have a lot of male leaders. And so having a coach in your corner to help you navigate the complexities of those environments, I personally saw it to be transformative. And so I wanted to create an opportunity for more women to have access to that, more people in general, but specifically, personally in my heart, it's always for, women and women of color to really elevate themselves and get into more leadership roles.
Thank you so much, Victoria, for the lovely introduction. And I absolutely love working with you. So thank you for joining us. I really didn't know if you would say yes, but thank you. Priyanka, over to you. Someone I've known for a long time, 36 months.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Hey, everyone. Happy International Women's Day. I think I would say I'm honored, truly honored to A, be invited, and then B, be part of these amazing women in the panelist. I mean, I have known few of them. I have talked to a few of them on personal level, and I just want to say I admire each one of them in their own fields. I think they're amazing women. To start off, I feel like I keep saying that I'm a product leader, but I feel like today I want to say I am a woman who has 1 kid, and I have a career in a product side. Because I feel like I'm women first, then my career comes in. But more than that, I have been in startups, I have been in big companies like Microsoft, and I have truly enjoyed being in this whole ambiguous space of 0 to 1, bringing new technologies, new products to market, and especially in the space where nobody knows what's going on. So this is exciting for me, just talking about equity, because I feel like I've been in those areas where we don't know what we want to do. So this is really exciting. And I'm just looking forward to hearing all the questions that the group has. Just looking at the chat, I'm like, wow, look at all these people out there. So I'm really excited to be part of this conversation today. Thank you, Bosky.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Welcome, Landy. If you want to introduce yourself, please. Thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely. Hello, hello, wherever you are. Again, happy International Women's Day. I am super excited to be here. I am Landy Spearman, the CEO and founder of Organized Shift. I am literally leaving one speaking engagement. So I'm in a room full of women who have been moving business forward. Entrepreneurs, people from all across Houston, which is where I am located. My business is Organized Shift, and what we do is we help leaders and teams to shift forward faster. We do that thanks to being in the product world that Bosky has created. We are currently in the cohort for PMDojo to productize the shift method. Shift actually stands for something. If you think about the amount of change that you go through, shift has to do with the speed, your human experience, using innovation to help to leverage your experience of the change that you are facing. Being flexible is the F, and the T is transparency. So these are the ways that we create this immersive and multi-sensory experience of learning how to do change better. Background in data. I am also a data scientist, a change leadership coach, amongst a few other things, including a mom of a daughter who just spoke yesterday. What was it? Yesterday, literally, who was a speaker as a 17-year-old. And so when we think about, this workforce of the future and embracing equity and what that looks like and what that feels like, a part of that is making sure that our incoming generation, we are able to speak their language. So that's a part of the change that we also help others to see and close those gaps. Thanks for having me, Bosky.
Thank you so much, Landy, for joining. Wow, so this is an incredible panel. My imposter syndrome and my self-doubt is kicking in big time. My stomach's already in knots. So while I'm multitasking, so I'm going to try to keep the nerves under control. And again, thank you everyone for joining. I am going to be moderating or trying to moderate this powerhouse of the panelists that we have today. I'm also a mom to an 8-year-old, and a lot of things that I work and a lot of things that I write about are typically daily influenced by my conversations that I have with my 8-year-old after his bath time in the night. So I totally, relate to the equity, especially I think being a woman of color and an immigrant in North America, and a lot of, I think, just hearing everything that a lot of our panelists are talking about. So let's get started. I think I want to start off with a question that I don't think I had answers to when I fully kind of grappled and understood until a few years ago. And that is about what is equity? What does equity mean in the context of International Women's Day, women's empowerment within the tech industry? And how is equity different from equality? Because I think a lot of people interchangeably use these two words. What is exactly the difference? What does it really mean in this context that we are in today? So would any one of the panelists like to take that on?
I can take it on. Oh, go ahead. Okay.
You start us off, Landy.
Okay, I'll kick us off. So it's funny you should ask, because we actually in our session, and you will hear, let me pause to say this, you'll hear my voice change. That's a part of that human experience. That's my emotion coming up for a very real and authentic answer. So I want to say that, in technology, that is okay. It's okay for our human self to show up. So with that said, Bosky, we actually just spoke about imposter syndrome. So it's funny that you're saying this, and it's great to be amongst others to think and talk about those things, so that we equalize and we normalize it. And it's like, hey, oh, you're feeling the same way. So that's a part of the conversation. So that's it, equity versus equity versus, what was it?
Equality.
Equality. So when I actually put a post up today, when you're thinking about equity and fairness, right? So fairness and access, everybody kind of being on this, not kind of, let me be intentional, everyone being on the same playing field, making it all equal. Okay. When you think about equality, creating access, closing those gaps, what needs to happen so that we close the gap, so that the data that we're sharing about how women are leaving tech, at a faster rate than men, the gaps in pay, the 29% gap in pay from men in the same jobs that we are, how do we close those gaps? A part of it is making it equitable so that the access that we have, if me as a woman, if I didn't have a background, if I didn't start here in technology, but I transferred my knowledge and my skills, as I'm finding we often do in product, we're transferring our skills. We didn't start here, then how do I still make it so that the qualifications or the job description don't say that I had to have a degree in product for me to qualify for this position, because I can transfer my skills. So that is one example of how to make it equitable for us all, so that we find ways to, again, close the gap. We don't look at everyone as just the same because we're all showing up here, we're all the same. There are some places where, as we know, opportunity and access, there are gaps, especially for women and women of color.
Thank you so much.
Add to it, right? Something just happened in this meeting as you kicked off, right? Bosky, you started the talk with a very humbling note on imposter syndrome. You freely gave credit to everyone else. I don't know if I deserve it, but thank you for that. And I can tell you that you are super awesome and you don't really need that imposter syndrome. And then when you asked a question, you saw that there was a period of silence because each of us were waiting for someone else to speak, right? So this is a very classic representation of work style of women in the workplace, right? We are more coming with a certain fairness and a value system that is not necessarily going to be coherent with what is the popular work stylist, right? In terms of, let's come and be aggressive, let's brand and market ourselves, let's talk about how awesome we are, right? So when we talk about equality and equity, equality is a fair distribution, assuming a fair distribution, right? So back to our probability lessons, you roll a dice, you have 1/6 chance of getting a number between 1 and 6. So everything is the same. However, when we talk about equity, we are assuming a very uneven playing field, right? So in terms of our work style, in terms of societal expectations, in terms of what our responsibility and biases are, how are we normalizing for those to create that fairness in the distribution? That's what equity is. So it does take into account, as I said, I am a logical thinker. It takes into account more variables than one. And we are trying to turn the knobs so that there is fairness and opportunity given to people with all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of work styles.
Amazing. I loved your dice example. Probability, a different question. What do we as women then do about it? Because we already know that the cards are stacked against us, right? Irrespective of where we come from, irrespective of whether we were born here, irrespective of how much privilege we have, irrespective of how much privilege we don't have. We all know, the stats are kind of frustrating and it angers me, but at the same time, I think we can sit and rant, or we can start taking an action so that next time around, we're not again talking about the same thing. I think really that's what it is about, right? We all know that men get promoted. And again, these are grossly stereotyping. So it's kind of interesting. We're even talking about these stereotypical kind of numbers here, but we all know that men get promoted based on their potential and women get promoted based on their performance. I mean, a lot of these things are there, right? So can maybe, if some of the panelists, if you would like to maybe answer about what do we do as women in tech and in product? What are maybe one or two things that we can do?
I knew Elangi had her hand raised. I thought if she wanted, okay, I will go and then I'll make sure I have some time for you. You know, it's funny because there's a lot of talk about equity, and I see people talking about when you want to make a change, they talk about let's bring in allyship. And I think that's a big word that everybody brings in into the companies and into the workforce and everywhere. And I, for once, I would say I agree, but I also think allyship is not that a person in the leadership position needs to bring in. It can be the other way around as well. And that's the one thing that we all forget, that we all have the power. It doesn't matter what level, what stage of career we are at, but we all have the power to become an ally. Just for us to become an ally, we don't need to have like 20 years of experience, be at a C level in the C-suite. I think if we are in a meeting, for example, and even if I am a junior person, and if I see that the women voice is not being heard, I feel like I could be like, oh, excuse me, can I just hear her for a second, right? Like that's the simplest way that I'm putting it in, but that is equity, giving a chance. And I think that's where I feel like the allyship should be said, that it's both ways. It's not just one way. But at the same time, I also feel like this should be, as much as it's for women, we should have men come in and have that allyship, right? If men exist in the world, we need to have that. And I mean, I would strongly believe that if they don't, I think it's just a one-sided thing, and it's not gonna be balanced out. As much as women need to do it and not say, oh, I did that, but actually make that as a norm that, okay, we're gonna do it, and people are gonna be like, oh yeah, we're sorry, we did that. And it should happen with the men. And if that happens, if we start standing up, I feel like we'll start getting heard a lot more at that point. But we forget, and we're like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if that's going to be okay. I think it's going to be okay. And if it's not, I think people will start being okay with it. There has to be a start somewhere. So for me, it starts at very small levels and small places, and not like at the big. It's not like, oh, leadership needs to make that change. No, I think it's us who needs to make that change. And that's where I feel like, as women, in whatever way, wherever you are, at whatever stage, you need to take that and be very mindful, like, okay, what can I do to make this change? And I strongly believe in that side. So.
Thank you, Priyanka. It's really, really kind of interesting, and I think, was it Landy who wanted to share?
Yeah, sure. Priyanka, I think we're in the cohort together, because just hearing you speak, as Bosky just pointed out, such great points. So a couple things. One is, and I'm looking here at the chat, the small wins can lead to the big changes, right? So as I said, organized shift, right? Shift is not just throw everything out. It's like, if we have things working together, if they're off just, if we think about the gears of a watch back before the Apple Watches for my millennials, okay? The gears on a watch, you could actually see them just off 1 millimeter could stop everything, okay? So the small wins can lead to big changes. So that's a real thing. So how do we do it? That's what we're talking about. How do we not just have the conversation or leaving with this, sense of frustration or sense of empowerment, but what do I do next? Or, I have these statistics, I have this data, what do I do next? So let me paint a picture from this perspective. Thinking of equity as fairness. Okay, so if we're thinking about equity in tech as fairness, the point that was just made about we're all in this meeting, everyone did not have a chance to speak. It's something that simple at the lower level, let's say, at the easiest, the low-hanging fruit, all right? Because if equity is about making sure that we get access to the same opportunities, having a voice matters. So that's one piece of it. If we think about equality as the sameness, if we're saying that, hey, we're all here, we're all on equal playing fields, we are all showing up, we all get the same opportunities, without accounting for my voice, without accounting for the fact that I don't have the same opportunities or the same resources. If we don't do that, then how do I get connected to what I need? So with that said, here are a couple ways that we can think about this. One is exactly what you said about allyship. So often we think about allyship as one is men, let me say that out loud, right? Or people who are privileged, the majority, right? So let's think of again, very general. I mean, I'm using very general terms. I'm going to say my white male client, my white male my 55-year-old white male client. Okay. He has the privilege. He is, he is supposed to be the ally. This is the connection. But think about the gap that is there, right? What does he not know? How much more adaptable am I because of the way that I've had to come into the room and the way that I've had to, I was excited about being in technology, but I was the only one in my class. So I had to adapt to other people. So closing the gap, when I'm saying that out loud, I'm saying for us to think about the fact that you have this superpower called vulnerability. You have a superpower called adaptability. Why? Because so many times you may have had to be the only one in the room. So sometimes it is us reaching out. It is us being there for each other. It is us having the conversation to say it's okay to not know all the answers, but let's do this together. And I think that so often, that's why I said, instead of just leaving frustrated or maybe excited, but without the how we do it, we get to do that together, and understanding that it really starts in these kind of conversations. And then it starts with taking action. Allyship through action is real.
I love that so much. And I love the framing of vulnerability as a superpower and how we can think about different ways that, different aspects of ourselves as women that maybe have been seen as weaknesses, and reframing that for ourselves as strengths, right? And taking and leaning into that. And in coaching, I always talk about the inner game and the outer game, right? And so in terms of the inner game, we want to master our own fears, our own anxieties, and strengthen ourselves internally with our mindset shifts and, mastering imposter syndrome and all these things, so that we can be as fortified as possible internally. And then externally in the outer game, we also have to show up and, push for more equity, push for reducing the unconscious bias, educating people around us, trying to champion ourselves as much as possible. For me, I got my 23andMe back, and I'm genetically predisposed to having a fear of speaking in public, right? I was such an introvert as a kid. When I was in kindergarten, I literally was hiding behind my teacher. I couldn't make any friends because I was afraid to talk to anybody as an immigrant coming to America, barely speaking English, right? I was just a scared little girl. And that scared little girl still pops up, especially when I'm in a meeting with a bunch of executives, right? Especially if they're all white male, that is deep, right? And so I think we have to acknowledge those aspects of ourselves too, and work on them, but also push externally. And if you're gaslighting yourself, if you're kind of, if you're being a bully to yourself internally, that's even worse, because you're not even being there for yourself. And so really mastering that and spending the time to provide yourself with the compassion and self-love, and, be there for yourself so that you can be, effective in spaces that are already not designed for you. I think that's just a really important aspect of the inner game and the outer game, and thinking between those two, how can we kind of keep pushing both of those forward? And yeah, I think putting all the pressure on ourselves too much is also unfair, right? Because there's so many things that are designed against us. But the alternative is to, what are you going to do? Otherwise, you have to really be mastering your own mindset and being there for yourself first before, all of these other aspects. You can be there to push those forward too.
I completely agree, right? Great. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives, Victoria, Priyanka, and Landy. And strong +1 for these small changes and small wins, right? However, I do want to acknowledge a point that Victoria called out, which is mighty drops of water might not make an ocean. Sometimes you need to open the dam, and the keys to the dam are held with people of greater privilege and influence. And I think we should try to keep that a little bit separate, because we'll do what we can and control in our universe, but that's not going to solve every single problem, right? The way I think of, and I love thinking in metaphors, right? So we are, let's say we're going on a highway, which is designed for high-speed cars, and you are coming on a bicycle. I think to start with, we have two problems, right? One is, how do we ride in our small bicycle on the highway that's designed for the cars, but also how do we pave that bicycle trail that's friendly for bikers, that is not going to help us now, but it's going to help our future. And I think the reason we are all here today and talking about equity so outspokenly and having this community is because there were people before us who did not shy away right from the suffragette movement of talking about women's rights in the first place, right? Otherwise, we'll be sitting here not being able to vote. And I do think this voice, the group of this collective think tank and the voice is great, but we should also keep pushing accountability on the right set of people to help make sure that we don't always need this army of women to do small wins, or army of women and male allies to do small wins, right? We have to think big and think about the infrastructural changes as well.
Thank you, Victoria, Rukmini, Priyanka, and Landy, for, I think, sharing so many gems there. I mean, I love the use of, I think, reframing a lot of the, I would say, the gaps, or perhaps I don't like the word weaknesses, but the things that I think a lot of women, we struggle with, whether it's vulnerability, whether it is, I think, taking the stage and holding our space, and using that as superpowers. Because I think something that I fell into the trap was that, because I never saw a lot of women who looked like me in executive leadership rooms, that as I started climbing the career ladder, I tried becoming more like men. And I ended up becoming really like a jerk, a period of time where I ended up becoming a jerk. And I was, I just call it jerk because that's exactly who I was becoming. And I was very much, I think, elements of it, because I was no longer the person that I was. I was no longer, and it just was very, very bad, right? It was like very hollow. And so I think it's very, very important, I think, to stay true to who we are and our style, but at the same time, I think making those wins, but at the same time also, I think, pushing for some of those bigger systemic changes. So that brings two questions that I have. One, and this question is for Victoria. You mentioned about being this really shy girl, and I think a lot of us, we can relate to that. When you were talking about that, I remembered what happened in one of the debate competitions back in school. Like, I can still smell those polished hardwood floors because I forgot my line and my house lost. I still remember that, and I was barely like 10-year-old back then. But Victoria, back to, I think, being that shy girl and to seeing you so confident and such an inspiring woman leader today, what are some of your coping strategies?
I love that, Bosky. Thanks for, I'm glad I appear confident. It's not always that I feel 100% that way, but I think for me, what has been the biggest shift is, when I was in leadership positions and I was speaking to a room full of executives and people who are from different functions, I would go in super anxious, but wanting to seem like I knew everything I was saying, wanting to appear very confident. And I would focus on that. And that actually made things worse for me, because afterwards I would overanalyze, oh, why did I say this? Or did I show up in this way? And I would start to beat myself up, and that just created this negative downward spiral of like, me, again, not being there for myself, right? Gaslighting myself, telling myself a bunch of negative things. And that reduced my own confidence. And it wasn't until I shifted and really was there for myself and was compassionate to myself that I could show up in a space and just speak my truth, speak whatever I did know, and be authentic and honest about what I didn't know, and still know that I was fine, even if that was the case. If I didn't know an answer to something, if I made a mistake, like, that's okay. That doesn't reduce my self-worth. That doesn't make me less of a leader. That doesn't make me less effective. I'm still capable, I'm competent, and I didn't have to be perfect. So as a recovering, high anxiety type A perfectionist, a lot of that internal work was absolutely necessary for me to get to a place where I'm mentally and emotionally capable and of taking care of myself, really. And that was where I started, right? And that, because I was able to give myself that and create that for myself internally, that strengthened my ability to navigate all of the chaos and complexity that we deal with externally on a day-to-day basis, in the work environments that we're in today. And yeah, so that's why I do put a good amount of emphasis on that internal work, because, I think we've been programmed and we've grown up in a society that doesn't tell us that, doesn't, give that to us. And so we have to kind of structure that for ourselves and push for that for ourselves so that we have internalized that all the way, right? You're not good enough, or women can't do this. Those are the messages that we've been given since we were little girls, right? A lot of times, unless you were fortunate to be in a more positive environment, which I always hope is the case for everyone. But if that wasn't the case, you have to create that for yourself today and override a lot of that history and all of that programming.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I really love that, Victoria, and relate to a lot of that. And related to that, one approach I've had with this challenge of imposter syndrome is thinking, can someone else do this better than me? Or do the people who are in these positions of leadership really know what they're doing? And when I think about it, a lot of times the answer is no, they don't actually know what they're doing. So it's as good as to bet on myself that, like, hey, I can actually do this. This is a new field. No one knows what they're doing. And so you really have the opportunity to define a new field. And so one thing that's comforting for me is really asking the question of the people who are in those leadership positions, do they actually understand this field well? Do they know what they're doing? And that actually gives me a lot of comfort in some ways, that I have an opportunity to add to the conversation, because a lot of times, they're also new at it. And so it's really anyone's game and opportunity to step in.
Thank you, Mace, for this. So I think the two things that I kind of caught from both of you, and it was super helpful. One is that internal work, and I think processing, and then figuring out what does that mean, so that then we can kind of figure out what are some of the things that we need to do in order to kind of not feel just that let down and the burden of, I think, being that perfect, because I think it's also maybe related with that a little bit. And I think from you, Mace, it is about, I think, looking at it objectively and seeing, okay, where can I bring in some of the strengths that I have, whether it is maybe the domain expertise, or whether it is something else that I can bring into the table that I might actually have a different perspective, maybe a stronger one, maybe a different one, compared to, let's say, some of the folks who might be in these powerful positions, right? So really, really, really useful. I remember on this imposter syndrome, and I was saying this to someone yesterday. Remember this conversation quite a few years ago, probably like 2013, 2014, when I joined Atlassian, and I was kind of feeling like I totally did not belong. There is this big kind of this exclusive Silicon Valley club that exists. And so I think entering that just is hard. And I think also coming as an outsider, I think just kind of feeling like you can reside and work with all of these folks who seem to like just so smart with some incredible background and history. I think someone told me that there is this very small line that separates humility and being a total jerk. And if you think about reframing imposter syndrome as like, hey, anytime we're doing something new or different, we get this feeling of discomfort, which is totally human and totally natural. But I think that imposter syndrome also helps us, if you want to stay on this side of the line, from actually staying humble, because just of the inherent nature that we may not know everything about it. But then if you cross that line, which is a very thin line, you can actually end up becoming a very cocky jerk that no one wants to work. So which side of the line do you want to be? And I think for me, that every time I kind of feel that, at least I'd like to remind myself which side of the line do I want to be. And I'm totally okay with, I think, completely, I think, feeling uncomfortable, but staying on the humble line. But I think that's just for me. I wanted to take one audience question that I received, and this is, what were maybe one or two things that helped you early in your career to where you are today? Looking back, what were those one or two very tangible things that you did either intentionally or unintentionally that has helped you where you are today? For anyone in the panelist.
And for me, one of the things was asking questions. I don't like confrontation. And so when I have conflicts, I actually tend to frame it as a question. And so I got feedback early on that asking questions is a really good way to talk about hard topics. So that's one thing that I've been doing and that I've been comfortable with is, kind of asking questions during hard discussions for my own personal style. And then and it also always helps you learn too, especially if you're early on in a new job, it's totally okay to ask a lot of questions, and it should actually be encouraged. You have some early amount of buffer time where, the more questions you ask, it's a good thing because you still have that forgiveness of being new. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, I think that helped me was to really just talk to, when I was starting out, I was a scientist and spent a long time trying to figure out how do I get away from the bench. And during that process, I ended up doing a lot of informational interviews with different people. And that has actually been networking and just talking to different people in different spaces has been another really helpful skill set over time too, is that ultimately to have a successful career, it's really important to have a wide network of different people you can call in for different times. And so over time, even though I am quite introverted, networking is something I've gotten comfortable with, and even cold reaching out to people who I don't know, but I think they have a really cool background, and just being upfront with that has been a really good thing to do. And a lot of times going in without any intention except to just have a really good conversation.
Thank you, Mace. I just loved framing conflict or difficult or hard things as questions. I just love that. Love that. Thank you for sharing that.
I think one tangible thing I can share is overcoming that fear of no or negativity. I think I initially shied away from even trying or asking for it, whether it is a promotion or an opportunity, because I was like, what if they say no? Am I really qualified for it? What if I will not make it? And then I really followed the fake it till you make it approach, because you go and ask for it. Chances are people are interested in what you are doing. Chances are people are going to say yes. And maybe there are 10 no's and 2 yeses. That's fine, right? So just doing our part in trying was something that I always started overcoming, because initially I would just, close certain topics in my head. And I'll assume that there is somebody, coming in a shining armor on a white horse and giving me that promotion as long as I put my head down and do the work. And then the more proactive I got, and this, by the way, just full disclosure, this does not mean I'm going and pestering people for a promo, or I'm basically networking by, going to golf and beer. I really don't have time for that, but just putting my head down, focusing on what I do well, very similar to what Mace was saying, and going and making sure that I'm having that conversation more directly, that really helped. The second thing I will also say is I always took feedback very personally in the beginning of my career. So a reflection of you could have done this better immediately translate to Rukmini, you're an idiot. You didn't even know this, in my head, right? And moving away from that and saying, okay, let's not take this as a full-blown postmortem on my self-worth, but let me take it for just what it's worth. And let me go incorporate that feedback. I think both of these really helped me overcome a lot of my own internal fundamental infrastructure to make sure that I was able to bring my best self to work.
Thank you, Rukmini, for this. I kind of remembered our conversation with Deb just a few days ago. It's like a lot of times, I think these high stake conversations that we have, we either dance around the issue, or we just ask it in a way that, hey, well, I'm not getting a promotion. I've had this conversation many times and I've not been getting a raise. And I think it's very, very important how we ask, right? And how we frame that. So thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. And I just wanted to, I think, kind of share, like, a lot of these topics is interesting that what I'm hearing today from a lot of you, these were a lot of the things that we heard time and time and time again from a lot of people that we interviewed, for a book that Priyanka and I are working on, which is about, unfiltered stories of people in tech and product. And it's kind of interesting that I think we've all kind of experienced a lot of those things. But then I think for many who haven't heard of these things, we kind of go back into our own shell of how we would actually try to and go back to those old habits. So it's really interesting. Anyone else who would like to share what are some of those one or two things that helped you in your early career?
Sure. So what I would share is I am the oldest of five, and I remember being about 12 years old, and telling my father that I'm a girl. I'm a girl. I am a girl, and I need you to love me as a girl, because I found myself very young growing up in Chicago. We have these businesses where I actually found my identity through the work that we did. I learned that before I got to corporate, so that was a benefit I can see now. But I say that to say, when I speak to the harnessing your vulnerability, it took me not to want to be a boy or to please my dad, because he wanted a boy first, and it took me to have the courage to say that early on, and then to walk in that experience of being a woman and wearing little ruffles and wearing my lipstick and being in these rooms and having these conversations, and being okay with the experience of myself. And listening to you all today, you said, what is one thing that we could walk away with? That is, one, I speak English, I speak Spanish, but I speak asshole fluently. Very fluently. And it comes from a place of understanding the language and being able to adapt and have a different conversation, because I can bring in who I am, because it's like, okay, I don't need to bump up against you. I have a different way. I have a diversity of perspective that I actually can share in a very different way. And so, that owning who you are, I say I'm an introverted extrovert. People are like, what? You're an introvert? Because I can observe and see, but that has come over time. So I think that the last thing that I will leave us with, or say, is the reminder of who you are today is great and good enough. It doesn't have to be who you aspire to be, the job that you're going after, the title, who you are today. And then if you're choosing to do something different or improve or get a new promotion, walk in the experience of that. Don't wait for somebody to tell you, to validate you, to confirm who you are. Walk in the experience of who you are.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful. And I was not expecting that. But sometimes you gotta take the reins in your hands, and you gotta do what you gotta do. As long as you do it tactfully, right? Because I think in a lot of the things that we're doing, I think if we alienate ourselves, and I think that is where it is like really strategically tactful. And I've seen you do this, over the last several weeks, and it's been just amazing to see this. I just want for staying along. I am on LinkedIn, so if you ever want to reach out and ask any questions, I've also been a hiring manager for a long time. So again, feel free to reach out, and have an amazing day, and go and uplift other women. And I hope you found the event today useful. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.